Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K Collector back with a video for the afternoon, and we've been spending a lot of time over the past couple days talking about the impact of video game collecting in the future in terms of what games are going to be worth, if they're going to be worth anything, you know, how much PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games will be worth in the future. And, you know, definitely got a lot of different comments, mixed opinions and mixed views on it for sure. But here's the thing. There has to be an end game when it comes to collecting video games, right? Like, eventually I'm going to get old. I'm not going to be able to take all of these games with me to the grave. So there has to be a final phase or some type of step that I eventually get to when it comes to collecting video games. And I would think that that's not just with video games, that's with anything, right? That's with, you know, if you collect muscle cars, if you collect coins, if you collect bottle caps, you know, postage stamps, whatever it is, there has to be some type of end game to your collection. And I think for most people, when they think about what their end game is for collecting, especially if they don't have like children or someone that they're considering passing their collections off to, I think a lot of people figure, well, you know what, when I get to a certain age, I'll just sell my collection and, you know, move on to my final stages of life. Some people, they say, well, you know, I'll be playing video games until I'm 90. How true that is, I guess only time will tell. But I think that's the reason why there's such a visceral reaction when we start to talk about video games and how much they're worth. Because I think a lot of people place, you know, significant value on the, you know, on the worth of their video game collections. And if, you know, you kind of tell someone that, hey, you know, this stuff isn't worth that much, or it's not worth anything, or this will be worth that, or that'll be worth this. I think that's why you can sometimes get the types of reactions that we see during this conversation. But there's a couple things that we got to keep in mind, which is that video games themselves, they are very, very subjective. The value is subjective. How much people are willing to pay for them is going to vary at different times, in different seasons, in different eras. And all of these things come into play once we start thinking about how much games are worth. And obviously that impacts our end game and our end goal. Now, for someone like me, the majority of the games that are in my collection are games that I either played as a kid, I had them as a kid, and now that I'm in prime adulthood, right? So what is prime adulthood? Prime adulthood to me is the point in your life where you are completely independent. You are getting zero help from mom and dad. Maybe you have a family of your own. You are out on your own and you are just literally just dealing with adult problems, right? Like you're paying your own bills. You're dealing with the issues of life, right? Like you're taking life on head first, you know, dealing with adult issues, right? Insurance, you know, childcare, bills, just all of the things that you did not have to deal with as a child or maybe as a teenager or even into your college years because you were getting some type of help from a mom, dad, uncle, grandma. Somebody was there holding you down, right? And I think it's when we have been in this phase of life, this adulting phase of life, this is where we tend to harken back to, you know, our childhood because we're so bogged down with adulting that we kind of want to just find that escape. We kind of want to feel young again. When we think about our childhood, it's like, oh man, I remember the days back in the day where I would just come home, you know, bust out some Punisher and play Punisher for 6 hours, you know, until my mom came home and then told me to wash up and get ready for dinner. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore, right? Like, depending on where you're at in life, you just can't. You know, you can't sit there and play Punisher for 6 hours. You can't do it. Or, you know, you can't get with your friends and go to your friend's house and sit there and play Sonic and Knuckles all day. You can't do that. Or even better, here's an even better one. You can't spend an entire day playing Ocarina of Time. And if you've ever spent a full day playing Ocarina of Time, raise your hand. Go ahead and let me know right down in the comments, because I know there were plenty of Saturdays where it's you roll out of bed, brush your teeth, grab the N64, and the only time you're leaving your room is to either use the bathroom, get a bowl of cereal, and you're just going back in there and you're trying to beat this game. Especially if you didn't have the guidebook, right? Like, I was the type of kid, never really got the guidebook, was just trying to make my way through the game. And so, you know, that's kind of the phase that you find yourself in when you start to do this thing called adulting, and you want to kind of get back some of that feeling, some of that nostalgia. Now, I've heard people say that, you know, the desire for that comes even later in life, like once you get into your 60s, you know, and you get to retirement age. But for me, that feeling pretty much came once I started doing real adulting, you know, having a career, you know, dealing with the pressures of corporate America, dealing with a boss, dealing with subordinates, if you are in management or if you are, you know, at a higher level in corporate America, just all these things that just remind you how much being an adult sucks. This is when you start to really chase after that, not the right price, but you actually chase after those things that kind of bring you back to that place of childhood. But then you got to ask yourself, like, at what point what point does it end? And what does it mean for me when I'm 50, 60, 70? Now, I have a daughter, I have, you know, a family, and I don't know if, you know, when my daughter gets old enough, if she's going to say, Dad, ooh, can we play Gunstar Heroes? I don't know if she's going to want to do that. She may want to go to the mall, hang with her friends. She may want to, if malls even still exist, right, at that time, she may want to do other things, you know what I mean? I don't know if she'll be interested in Sega Genesis or if she'll be interested in PlayStation 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. But what I do know is that there has to be an end game. There has to be an end point. And I think for a lot of folks, including myself, that end point is probably going to involve moving on from the collection, right? Selling it off, giving it away, whatever the case may be. Now, if you are the type of person who is banking on your collection being your retirement, and I've had friends, you know, tell me that. I've had people tell me that their collection is literally their retirement. Oh yeah, well, all the games and all the stuff you see in there, that's what I'm going to retire on. If you're looking at your game collection as your retirement, the more you view it as money, I think is the more emotional you're going to get about your collection and about the value that your collection has, because it's less about the intrinsics and more about the dollars and cents. Now, don't get me wrong. I love talking about the value of games. I love talking about how much games cost, because that's what most people love to watch. I mean, think about it. More people watch YouTube videos of people buying really expensive games than people going and buying a bunch of sports titles. No one's gonna, you know, the video that showcases a person finding 3 copies of NBA Live 94 isn't going to get that many views. But if you put in the thumbnail, oh, I scored a copy of Castlevania for $2, everyone's going to watch that, because most people know how much Castlevania Bloodlines goes for. And it's the monetary piece that gets the dopamine going. It's the dollar value that gets the dopamine going, because you realize, oh man, I got so much value for this thing. And you know, it's the money factor. So to act like that's not important is really just, I don't believe you. You know what I mean? We don't believe you. You need more people, right? Like, if you try to sit there and say like money doesn't matter, so on and so forth, it's not real. Now, if money truly isn't an issue for you, and if you really genuinely don't care about the monetary value of games, most of those people emulate. And they don't emulate just because it's cheaper. They just emulate because they want to experience the game, and they don't care about, you know, experiencing it in its original hardware. For me, I'm a big fan of original hardware. I'm a huge fan of getting the game, looking at the material, feeling the plastic, opening up the case, right? Opening up the case and seeing the manual, you know, flipping through the pages, remembering what the paper that they used back in the 1990s smelled like, the weird artwork on the cartridges, the material, how tough and durable this plastic is. I mean, I don't know if this stuff will ever biodegrade. It's never going to die. This plastic is like made of tough stuff, right? This is the part of collecting that appeals to me because I'm a huge fan of the physical aspect of it. And I don't know if my daughter is going to look at these things and say, like, when I see games that were before my time, games that my brothers had, games that my brothers played, the cartridges that they played, I remember I would, like, especially when I was a kid, I would hold like the Atari cartridges and just try to imagine in my mind what it must have been like to be my brothers when they were my age at the time, getting their Atari games. And I would try to almost reimagine what that feeling feels like. And there's value in that. Like, there's value in having that experience. And if there wasn't value in that, then there wouldn't be remakes of things. You wouldn't see people coming out with modern, you know, remakes of certain types of record players or even sneakers. I mean, I mean, it's not recent, but a couple years ago, I got a pair of Jordans. And they were literally, Jordan brand has a line called Reimagined. And what it's meant to do is to take you back to the time where that shoe was originally released. They actually have a shoe called the Lost and Found. And the entire box and makeup of the shoe box is meant to take you back to a time in the early 1980s where someone forgot a random pair of Air Jordans up in a storage closet and it still had the original receipt. And they actually went and remade like an original receipt from back in the day with a signature and everything to give you that experience of finding a shoebox from the 1980s. And so there's value in having that type of experience. And to downplay it, I guess, is, you know, I guess it's subjective. Some people care about it, some people don't. But there's definitely a monetary value to the video games that we buy and the video games that we play. And to act like it doesn't exist is just to live in a state of denial. So I think that ultimately, if you are collecting and you know, your end game is, you know, this is my retirement, this is, you know, how I'm going to feed myself and my family once I stop working, then I could see why some people have their reactions to certain valuations and the pricing conversation and the value conversation. But if you're a person who just really enjoys the games, and yes, you understand that there's a monetary value to it, but it's not the driving force for you, I don't think those reactions are going to be the same. I think that you will appreciate whatever value the market applies to your collection, whether it be high or whether it be low. And regardless of what happens, you're going to enjoy the games that you have during the season that you have them for nostalgia. And then you'll deal with whatever they're worth when you decide to sell them. And that's kind of how I look at it. My collection and my games that I have in my collection are going to be exactly what they're meant to be for me, entertainment. And then maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, if I decide to liquidate my entire collection, I'll worry about what they're worth then. But I do, now it doesn't mean that I'm just going to buy blindly and not pay attention to certain things. Of course, I pay attention to certain things. But I do think, and this is just kind of continuing the conversation that I had earlier, I do think that there will be a difference 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, when I'm 100 years old or whatever the case may be. I do think that there will be a difference in value between things that are this old and things that are this old, right? I think that 30 years from now, we will still be able to find a lot more of this, and it'll be way harder to find more of this. Because now these items, which are currently 30 years old, they'll be 60 years old by then. And they'll have even more wear and tear. They will have passed through even more hands, and even more of them will become destroyed. Whereas over here, we're still going to have a whole lot of this, and we're definitely going to have a whole lot of that. So if you're wondering if switching stuff will be around, yeah, they'll definitely be around 30 years from now. But what will the market be like? Who knows? That's why you should only buy the stuff that you're going to enjoy today, and then whatever they'll be worth in the future will be what they're worth. But what do I know? I'm just a casual collector. It's the Y2K collector. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Take it easy.